Hello everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The morning I realized I had everything but couldn't even scream for help. Picture this, a gorgeous California morning, sunlight streaming through your dream home's windows, a successful career, a loving husband, and two beautiful children sleeping peacefully upstairs. You have everything society told you would make you happy. Now imagine waking up one day and realizing you cannot even call 911 if something goes wrong because your English is so broken that the operator wouldn't understand you. That was my reality exactly 7 years ago. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I almost lost my mind in that beautiful house with the white picket fence. You see, I had achieved what people call the American dream, but the cruel irony was that I couldn't speak the language of my own dream. I was a successful immigrant woman living in Los Angeles, driving a nice car, wearing designer clothes, yet completely voiceless in a country that never stops talking. The breaking point came during my daughter's first parent-teacher conference at her American elementary school. I walked into that classroom filled with confident American mothers who discussed phonics, extracurricular activities, and behavioral development like they were born with this vocabulary in their DNA. I sat there for 45 excruciating minutes nodding and smiling like a broken bobblehead doll, saying nothing except yes, I agree, and that sounds nice whenever someone glanced my way. Inside my head, a war was raging. I had brilliant opinions, thoughtful questions, and genuine concerns about my child's education. But every time I tried to form an English sentence, my brain froze like a computer crashing. Do you know that suffocating feeling? That moment when you have an entire universe inside your head but zero ability to release it? That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and sobbed so loudly that my husband knocked on the door thinking I was injured. When I finally opened it, he looked at me with genuine confusion and asked, "But honey, you have everything. Why are you crying?" And that question hit me harder than any language barrier ever could. Because he was right. I had the house, the car, the family, the Instagram perfect life. But I had lost the most essential thing a human being needs, my voice. Right there on that cold bathroom floor, surrounded by expensive marble tiles, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to stop pretending and start fighting. Not for the American dream I had already achieved, but for something far more precious. My ability to be truly seen and heard in this country I now call home. And that decision led me down a path I never expected, one filled with humiliating mistakes, unexpected romance, and a love story that proved language is just a small part of what it means to truly connect. The two words that made me want to disappear forever. You know what's more terrifying than giving a speech in front of 1,000 people? Trying to order a simple cup of coffee in a country where everyone speaks faster than you can think. I'm not joking. The morning after my bathroom breakdown, I walked into a Starbucks near my Los Angeles home with a mission. Order a vanilla latte like a normal human being. Simple, right? Wrong. The barista, a cheerful young woman with purple hair, looked at me and asked, "What can I get started for you today?" And my brain, my brilliant overachieving brain that had graduated from a top university, completely shut down. I opened my mouth and what came out wasn't "I'd like a vanilla latte," please. What came out was a strange combination of sounds that vaguely resembled English but was actually a jumbled mess of panic. Vanilla. Hot a milk coffee, please? The barista tilted her head like a confused puppy. You mean a vanilla latte? I nodded so fast I almost gave myself whiplash. But the humiliation didn't stop there. She asked if I wanted whipped cream, and I didn't understand the word whipped. So I just stood there smiling like an idiot while people behind me in line started sighing loudly. I felt my face turn the color of a tomato, grabbed my coffee, and fled the store like I had just committed a crime. That was the moment I realized my problem wasn't just vocabulary or grammar. My problem was fear. Pure, primal, paralyzing fear of being judged. You see, when you're a woman living in America as a non-native speaker, every conversation feels like a test you didn't study for. The grocery store cashier asks, paper or plastic? And you freeze because you don't know which one is better for the environment. And what if you choose wrong and she judges you? The neighbor waves and says, how's it going? And you panic because you don't know if you should say good, well, or fine. And suddenly you're overthinking the word good like it's a philosophy exam. I spent my first 3 years in America being the quiet girl in the corner. The one who smiles but never talks. The one everyone assumes is shy, but actually is screaming internally with 1,000 thoughts she can't express. And let me tell you, being the silent immigrant woman is exhausting. It's like wearing a mask that slowly suffocates you while everyone around you breathes freely. But something unexpected happened at that coffee shop. Something that rewired my entire brain and changed my American life forever. As I was fleeing in shame, I accidentally crashed into someone and spilled my coffee all over his crisp white shirt. I looked up, mortified, ready to apologize in broken English, and I saw the most beautiful blue eyes I had ever encountered. And instead of getting angry, he smiled. Well, that was dramatic, he said slowly, clearly noticing my panic. Are you okay? That moment, right there, with coffee dripping down his expensive shirt, I realized something profound. He didn't care about my perfect English. He cared about me. And that realization terrified me even more than ordering coffee. The embarrassing question that changed my life forever. Let me tell you about the most humiliating question I have ever been asked in America. It wasn't about my immigration status, my education, or my career. It was something so simple, so ridiculously basic, that I still cringe when I think about it. After spilling coffee on that stranger's white shirt, I stood there frozen, wanting to disappear into the floor. He looked at me, those gorgeous blue eyes filled with amusement rather than anger, and asked slowly, "What time is it?" That was it. A simple question. What time is it? But in my panic-stricken brain, I completely forgot the word time. I stared at my watch, opened my mouth, and the only thing I could think to say was, "It is o'clock now?" He blinked. I blinked. And then, to my absolute horror, he burst out laughing. Not a mean laugh, not a mocking laugh, but a genuine, warm, can't-help-it laugh that made his whole face light up. "Clock now?" he repeated, wiping tears from his eyes. I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because that's the most creative way anyone has ever told me the time. That moment was supposed to be my ultimate shame. Instead, it became my ultimate turning point. You see, in my head, I had built this massive wall around my English skills. I convinced myself that if I didn't speak perfectly, I didn't deserve to speak at all. I was so terrified of making mistakes that I made the biggest mistake of all. I stopped trying. This stranger, whose name I later learned was Mark, completely shattered that belief with one sentence. You know what, he said, still smiling? Your English is way better than my Vietnamese. And I bet you're way more interesting than your grammar. He pulled out his phone, typed something, and handed it to me. It was his contact information. Text me later if you want to practice, he said. I promise I won't laugh at clock now again. I walked home that day holding that phone number like it was made of gold. But here's the thing about vulnerability, it's terrifying. For the next 3 days, I stared at my phone like it was a ticking bomb. Should I text him? What would I say? What if my grammar was so bad he changed his mind? What if he was just being polite? My brain created 1,000 reasons to stay silent. But then I remembered that bathroom floor. I remembered how it felt to have everything but nothing at all. And I realized that the American dream wasn't waiting for me in a perfect English sentence. It was waiting for me in the courage to sound stupid. So I typed the most terrifying message of my life. Hi Mark. This is Coffee Lady. Want to get coffee again? I promise no spill this time. I hit send before I could overthink it, dropped my phone on the bed, and paced my room for 20 minutes like a caged animal. When my phone buzzed, my heart almost stopped. He replied instantly. Coffee Lady. I was hoping you'd text. How about tomorrow at 3? And you can spill all the coffee you want. I'll bring extra shirts. That was the beginning of everything. But I had no idea, not even a clue, that this simple coffee date would lead me down a path I never expected, filled with cultural shock, family drama, and a love so powerful it would redefine my entire existence in America. The coffee date that felt like a job interview I failed miserably. Let me be completely honest with you. That first coffee date with Mark was not romantic. It was not cute. It was not anything like the movies where two people lock eyes and instantly fall in love. It was, without exaggeration, one of the most painful experiences of my American life. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, wearing an outfit I had changed 5 times. My hands sweating so much I could barely hold my phone. Mark walked in looking effortlessly handsome, ordered 2 drinks like it was nothing, and sat across from me with that warm smile that had made me text him in the first place. And then the conversation started. Or should I say, the conversation attempted to start. He asked me about my day. I said good. He asked about my job. I said good. He asked about my family. I said good. I was so nervous that my entire vocabulary shrank to one single word. Good, good, good. I sounded like a broken record that only knew how to say one positive adjective. Mark looked at me with those blue eyes and said gently, "You know, you can say more than good. I promise I won't bite." That sentence was both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it meant he actually wanted to hear me speak. Liberating because it meant he already knew I was struggling and didn't care. So I took a deep breath, and I told him the truth. "I'm scared," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared you will think I'm stupid because my English is not perfect." And you know what he did? He reached across the table, took my trembling hand, and said something I will never forget. "My English is perfect, and I can barely put together a coherent thought most days. Perfection doesn't make interesting people. Interesting people make interesting conversations. And I bet you have some pretty interesting things to say." That was the first time in America that someone made me feel like my broken English was not a weakness, but a part of my story. So I started talking. Slowly at first, stumbling over words, pausing to search for vocabulary. I told him about my first week in America when I accidentally put salt in my coffee instead of sugar because I couldn't read the labels. I told him about the time I said, "I'm so horny" instead of "I'm so hungry" at a family dinner. And the silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I told him about all my embarrassing moments, my failures, my fears. And Mark listened. Not politely, not patiently, but genuinely, like every word I said was the most fascinating thing he had ever heard. 3 hours later, we were still sitting there, our coffee long cold, the sun setting outside the window. Mark looked at me and said, "You know what I love about you? You're so brave. You came to a country where you didn't know anyone, didn't know the language, and you built a life. That's not weakness. That's courage." And in that moment, sitting in that coffee shop with a man who saw me, truly saw me, I felt something shift inside my heart. But I had no idea that this was just the beginning. That the real challenges were still ahead of me. Challenges that would test not only my English but my entire understanding of love, culture, and what it truly means to belong. The cultural shock that nearly destroyed our relationship. Let me tell you something nobody warns you about when you fall in love with someone from a different culture. Love is not enough. I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. Mark and I had amazing chemistry, we laughed together, we shared our deepest fears. But when it came to the practical realities of building a life together in America, we were completely clueless. The first major shock happened when Mark introduced me to his parents. In my culture, meeting the parents is a formal, almost ceremonial event. You dress modestly, you bring gifts, you address them with utmost respect, and you absolutely never, ever call them by their first names. So you can imagine my horror when Mark's mother, a warm blonde woman named Susan, opened the door and said, "Oh my God, you must be the coffee girl. Just call me Susan, honey." Call her Susan? I almost fainted. In my world, calling your boyfriend's mother by her first name is disrespectful enough to end a relationship. I stood there frozen, holding my carefully chosen gift of expensive tea, completely unable to process what was happening. But that was just the beginning. The real earthquake came during dinner. Mark's father asked me about my job, and I explained that I was working as a marketing assistant. Then he casually asked, "So, what's your 5-year plan?" I almost choked on my salad. 5-year plan? In my culture, you don't ask someone about their career plans over dinner. That's considered pushy and rude. But in America, apparently, it's normal conversation. I mumbled something about wanting to grow in my career, but inside I was panicking. Did he think I was lazy? Did he think I didn't have ambition? I spent the entire night analyzing every word, every gesture, every facial expression. I went home and cried to Mark, "Your family hates me." Mark looked genuinely confused. Hate you? Mom said you were the sweetest girl I've ever dated. And that's when I realized the gap between us wasn't just about words. It was about entire worlds of meaning that got lost in translation. The second major shock came when we started talking about marriage. In my culture, when you get married, you don't just marry the person. You marry their entire family. You're expected to live with or near your in-laws, to take care of them in their old age, to prioritize their needs above your own. Mark almost had a heart attack when I brought this up. "Wait, you expect us to live with my parents?" he asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I love them, but I need my own space." I was equally shocked. "You would just abandon your parents?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. "That's so selfish." We argued for hours, both convinced the other was completely unreasonable. I thought he was cold and heartless. He thought I was enmeshed and codependent. And in that moment, our beautiful love story felt like it was crashing down around us. But here's what saved us. Mark looked at me, took my hands, and said something that changed everything. "We're not from the same world," he said quietly. "But we're building a new one together. Let's figure this out, one piece at a time." And that's exactly what we did. We talked for weeks, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, always learning. He explained that American families show love through independence and respect for boundaries. I explained that my family shows love through closeness and sacrifice. We didn't choose one culture over the other. We created our own hybrid, a unique blend of both worlds. But the biggest test was still coming, and it would involve a tiny little baby who would force us to confront every single difference we had. The pregnancy that broke us and made us. The positive pregnancy test was supposed to be the happiest moment of our lives. And it was, for about 5 seconds. Then reality hit me like a freight train. I was going to have a baby in America, a country where I still struggled to explain my symptoms to a doctor. Where I still said I have pain in my stomach instead of I'm having contractions. Where the entire medical system felt like a foreign language I had never studied. My first prenatal appointment was a nightmare. The doctor, a kind but fast-talking woman, threw medical terms at me like confetti. Gestational diabetes, epidural, amniotic fluid, postpartum depression. I nodded along, pretending to understand, but inside I was drowning. When we got home, I collapsed on the couch and sobbed. "I can't do this," I told Mark. "I don't even know what half of those words mean. How am I supposed to have a baby in a language I barely speak?" Mark held me and said something that surprised me. Then we'll learn together. Every word. Every appointment. I'll be right there translating. And he was. He came to every single appointment, holding my hand, repeating the doctor's words slowly, explaining what they meant in simple English. He created flashcards of medical terms and quizzed me every night. He practiced birth scenarios with me until I could say I need an epidural without stuttering. But the real challenge came when I had to make decisions about my birth plan. In my culture, natural birth is often preferred, and interventions are seen as unnecessary or even dangerous. But in America, the medical system is highly interventionist. The doctors kept pushing for induction, for monitoring, for things that made me deeply uncomfortable. Mark respected my wishes, but he also wanted me to understand the American perspective. It's not about control, he explained gently. It's about safety. They want to make sure you and the baby are okay. We argued, we researched, we talked for hours until we found a middle ground that honored both my cultural beliefs and the American medical reality. Then came the birth itself. I won't lie to you, it was terrifying. 42 hours of labor, pain I didn't know was possible, and moments when I truly thought I might not make it. But Mark never left my side. He held my hand, whispered encouragement, and translated every instruction from the nurses. When I screamed in Vietnamese out of pure instinct, he didn't flinch. He just held me tighter. And when our daughter was finally placed on my chest, a perfect little human with dark hair and Mark's blue eyes, I looked at her and said the most perfect English sentence of my entire life. Welcome to the world, baby. I love you more than words can say. And I meant every single word of it. But the challenges didn't end with childbirth. Postpartum depression hit me like a wave I never saw coming. I felt isolated, overwhelmed, and deeply alone. I couldn't explain to Mark why I was crying over nothing. I couldn't tell him that I felt like a terrible mother because I couldn't soothe my own baby. And worst of all, I started resenting him. He spoke English perfectly. He could navigate the system. He could handle everything with such ease while I struggled with the simplest tasks. It felt so unfair. We started fighting, really fighting, in ways we never had before. And for the first time, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Was love really enough? Could we survive this? The wedding that wasn't supposed to happen. You know what's harder than having a baby in America? Planning a wedding in America while your entire family is on the other side of the world. After the postpartum storm had finally settled, Mark looked at me one evening and said something that made my heart stop. Let's get married. For real this time. We had been living together for years, we had a child together, but we had never actually had a proper wedding. And in my culture, a wedding isn't just a party. It's a sacred ceremony that binds two families together. It's a public declaration that you are choosing each other, forever, in front of everyone who matters. So when Mark proposed, I was overjoyed. And then I remembered the logistics. My family was in Vietnam. His family was in California. We had to plan a wedding that honored both cultures, accommodated both languages, and didn't break the bank. Oh, and I had to do it all while still struggling with my English. No pressure, right? The first disaster came when we started discussing the guest list. In my culture, you invite everyone. I mean everyone. Distant cousins, family friends, neighbors from 30 years ago, your parents' coworkers. It's considered rude to exclude anyone. Mark, being an American, wanted an intimate ceremony with only close friends and family. He nearly had a heart attack when I showed him my list of 200 names. Wait, who is this person? He asked, pointing at a name. My mother's cousin's daughter, I replied. You've never even met her, he said, bewildered. That doesn't matter, I explained. She is family. She must come. We argued for weeks, both convinced the other was being unreasonable. Finally, we compromised. We would have a small ceremony in California for Mark's family and a separate celebration in Vietnam for mine. It was expensive, exhausting, and absolutely insane. But it was worth it. The second disaster was the language. How do you have a bilingual wedding when half the guests don't speak English and the other half don't speak Vietnamese? We decided to have a bilingual ceremony with an interpreter. But that created its own problems. The interpreter was a kind woman who spoke both languages fluently, but she wasn't a professional wedding officiant. She stumbled over the vows, mixed up the order of the rings, and at one point, she accidentally said, "You may now kiss your uncle," instead of "You may now kiss your bride." The entire room burst into laughter. And in that moment, I realized something beautiful. Nobody cared about the mistake. They cared about celebrating love. My broken English, Mark's chaotic Vietnamese, the interpreter's hilarious mix-up, none of it mattered. What mattered was that two families had come together to witness something extraordinary. The third and most unexpected disaster came when Mark's mother, Susan, announced that she wanted to give a speech. I froze. A speech? In English? In front of everyone? I was terrified. What if she said something I didn't understand? What if she said something that embarrassed me? What if she said something that made me cry in front of all these people? Susan walked up to the microphone, looked at me with tears in her eyes, and said something I will never forget. I didn't just gain a daughter-in-law today, she said. I gained a daughter. And I don't care if she calls me Susan or Mom. I love her, and I love the brave, beautiful, and incredibly strong woman she is. I sobbed so hard I couldn't even speak. And Mark held me, and for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. But the biggest surprise came at the very end of the wedding, when something completely unexpected happened. Something that would change our lives forever and lead us down an even more beautiful path. The announcement that changed everything at our wedding. So there we were, standing on the dance floor at our wedding, surrounded by our families who had traveled from opposite sides of the world. The music was playing, everyone was laughing and crying and celebrating this beautiful union between two cultures. And then something happened that nobody expected. My mother, who had flown all the way from Vietnam and hadn't spoken a single word of English the entire trip, suddenly grabbed the microphone. She looked at Mark's parents, took a deep breath, and said in the most broken, beautiful English I had ever heard. Thank you for loving my daughter. She is my heart. Now she is your heart too. Mark's mother burst into tears. His father started clapping. And the entire room erupted in cheers. But my mother wasn't finished. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, and said, I have one more surprise for you. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. I opened it and found an ultrasound photo. My hand flew to my mouth. I was pregnant again. Our wedding night wasn't just the beginning of our marriage. It was the beginning of our second child's journey into this world. The announcement changed everything. Suddenly, our beautiful wedding celebration became a double celebration. We were getting married and we were expanding our family. But the timing couldn't have been more chaotic. We were in the middle of planning our lives together, navigating 2 cultures, 2 families, and now a second baby. I was terrified. My first pregnancy had been so difficult. The postpartum depression, the isolation, the overwhelming fear that I wasn't good enough to be a mother in America. How was I supposed to do this all over again? Mark saw the panic in my eyes and pulled me aside. We've got this, he said, his voice calm and steady. We're stronger now. We're a team. And we have an entire army of people who love us. He was right. This time was different. This time, I had a support system. I had a husband who understood my struggles. I had in-laws who genuinely cared about me. And I had the confidence that came from surviving the impossible. But the second pregnancy brought its own challenges. I was working part-time from home, trying to manage a toddler who was discovering the terrible twos, and preparing for the arrival of a new baby. My English had improved significantly since my first pregnancy. I could now hold conversations with my doctor without needing Mark to translate. I could discuss my birth plan with confidence. I could even joke with the nurses. But there were still moments of doubt. I still woke up in the middle of the night worrying that I would never fully belong here. I still felt like an outsider during playdates with other American mothers. I still struggled to understand the subtle cultural nuances that seemed so natural to everyone else. One night, when my daughter was finally asleep and Mark was working late, I sat alone in our kitchen and cried. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of overwhelming gratitude. I looked around our home, filled with furniture from 2 continents, family photos on the walls, my daughter's artwork scattered across the fridge. And I realized something profound. This was my life. This was my American dream. It wasn't perfect. It was messy, chaotic, and sometimes completely overwhelming. But it was mine. And I had built it, one broken English sentence at a time. Mark came home that night and found me smiling through my tears. What happened? He asked, alarmed. I walked over to him, wrapped my arms around his neck, and whispered, nothing happened. I'm just happy. And for the first time, I truly meant it. But the universe had one more surprise in store for us. Something that would test our love, our patience, and our commitment in ways we never imagined. Something that would force us to confront every fear we had about raising children in a multicultural world. And it would happen in the most unexpected place of all. The night my daughter asked me if she was American. You know what's harder than learning English yourself? Watching your child grow up speaking it fluently while you still stumble over words. My daughter, Lily, is 5 years old now. She speaks English like a native, with that perfect American accent that I still can't quite master. She corrects my pronunciation. She teaches me new words. She is everything I dreamed she would be: confident, articulate, and completely at home in this country. But one night, she asked me a question that shattered my heart into a million pieces. "Mommy," she said, her big blue eyes looking up at me with genuine confusion. "Why do you sound different? Why do you talk funny?" I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. My own child, the one I had carried, birthed, and raised, was asking me why I didn't sound like everyone else. I didn't know what to say. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Mark, sensing my distress, knelt down beside Lily and said gently, "Mommy doesn't talk funny. Mommy talks beautiful. She speaks 2 languages. Can you speak 2 languages?" Lily shook her head. "Well," Mark said, "that makes Mommy pretty special, doesn't it?" Lily nodded, hugged me, and ran off to play. But the damage was done. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying those words over and over in my head. "Why do you talk funny?" My own daughter thought I was different. My own daughter saw me as an outsider. My own daughter was embarrassed by me. I know she didn't mean to hurt me. She was just a child asking an innocent question. But the question revealed something deeper. My daughter was American. She would grow up in this country, speak this language, embrace this culture. And I would always be the foreigner, the one with the accent, the one who didn't quite fit in. I had dreamed of giving my children a better life in America. But I never imagined that my success would make me feel so disconnected from them. The next morning, I decided to do something drastic. I enrolled in an advanced English class at a local community college. I was terrified, embarrassed, and completely out of my comfort zone. But I was also determined. I refused to let my children see me as someone who couldn't keep up. I refused to let my accent define our relationship. I refused to be the mother who couldn't help with homework, who couldn't have deep conversations, who couldn't fully participate in her children's lives. Mark was my biggest supporter. He watched the kids every Tuesday and Thursday, gave me encouragement when I wanted to quit, and celebrated every small victory. And slowly, something amazing happened. I started to improve. Not just my grammar or vocabulary, but my confidence. I started speaking in full sentences without panicking. I started joining conversations with other parents at school pickup. I started telling stories, jokes, and even arguing about politics at dinner parties. But the most beautiful transformation happened in my relationship with Lily. She started coming to my classes with me on weekends, sitting in the corner with her coloring books, watching her mother learn. And one afternoon, she looked at me with pride in her eyes and said, "Mommy, you're getting really good at English. I'm proud of you." I almost burst into tears. My daughter, the one who had asked why I talked funny, was now proud of me. And then came the moment that changed everything. The moment I realized that my American dream wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about speaking like a native or blending in seamlessly. It was about something far more precious. It was about showing my children that you can start from nothing, struggle for years, fail countless times, and still build a beautiful life. It was about teaching them that courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to keep going despite it. It was about creating a home where two languages, two cultures, and two hearts can coexist in perfect harmony. And it happened on a day I least expected, in a place I never imagined. The day I realized my American dream was never about me. Let me take you back to that coffee shop. The one where I spilled coffee on Mark's shirt, the one where I said clock now instead of what time is it, the one where everything began. 7 years later, I walked through those same doors, but I was a completely different person. I was no longer the terrified immigrant woman who couldn't order a latte without panicking. I was a wife, a mother of two, a business owner, and a woman who had finally found her voice. Mark was with me, holding my hand, and Lily was bouncing excitedly beside us, already asking for hot chocolate. As I stood in line, the barista, a young woman with purple hair who looked suspiciously like the one from all those years ago, asked me, "What can I get started for you today?" And without hesitation, I replied, "I'll have a vanilla latte with oat milk, please. And a hot chocolate for my daughter." I didn't stutter. I didn't panic. I didn't overthink. I just ordered coffee like a normal human being. Mark squeezed my hand and whispered, "Look at you. You've come so far." And in that moment, I realized something profound. My American dream was never about me. It was never about getting a green card, a house, a career, or even perfect English. It was about creating a life where my children could grow up without the fears that haunted me. It was about building a home where two cultures could coexist, where my children would never feel ashamed of their mother's accent, where they would grow up proud of their Vietnamese heritage and their American identity. It was about showing them that you can be both, that you don't have to choose. That your differences are not weaknesses but the very things that make you special. Over the years, I have learned so much about this country, about love, about family. I learned that American families are not cold or distant, as I once believed. They are just different. They show love through independence and respect for boundaries, not through constant togetherness and sacrifice. I learned that American mothers are not competitive or judgmental. They are just trying their best, just like me, navigating the chaos of parenthood with grace and humor. I learned that American culture is not shallow or superficial. It's just fast-paced, optimistic, and endlessly hopeful. And I learned that the American dream is not a destination. It's a journey, a constant evolution, a never-ending process of becoming who you were meant to be. But the most important thing I learned is this: love transcends language. Mark loved me when I couldn't say good morning without checking the grammar in my head. His family welcomed me when I accidentally called Susan Mrs. Susan for 3 months because I was too nervous to say her first name. My daughter hugged me when I stumbled over her bedtime stories. And my son, born 2 years after our wedding, looks at me with his big brown eyes and says, "Mommy, I love your voice. You sound like home." That, right there, is my American dream. Not a perfect English sentence. Not a 6-figure salary. Not a corner office. A family that loves me exactly as I am, broken English and all. So if you're watching this and you're struggling with your English, if you're terrified of making mistakes, if you feel like you'll never truly belong in this country, I want you to hear me. You belong. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And the most beautiful thing about the American dream is that it doesn't require perfection. It requires courage. It requires showing up every single day, even when you're scared, even when you fail, even when you feel like giving up. Because someday, you will look back at this moment and realize that every mistake, every embarrassment, every tear was part of something far greater than you ever imagined.